In this series, we explore the mysterious past of ancient Greece. You can watch the whole series right here. After Alexander the Great died, his empire broke into pieces. It fell apart so quickly that not even his generals could control it. Yet there was one place where power shifted hands but never left the Mediterranean. That place was Egypt. Alexander had taken this country 332 BCE, impressed by its wealth, its order, and especially its location. Egypt controlled the trade routes between Europe, Asia, and Africa, the raw materials and the luxuries that fueled the Mediterranean world. Its capital, Alexandria, became the greatest city in the eastern Mediterranean. But while the pharaohs had made Egypt a hub of trade, Alexander wanted something more. He wanted Alexandria to be more than just a port city. He wanted it to be the beating heart of learning and culture. How? With the greatest library the world had ever seen. Our story begins with Ptolemy the Fool, one of Alexander's generals. He was in charge of governing Egypt after Alexander died. Now Ptolemy liked to call himself pharaoh, but he wasn't a pharaoh in the traditional sense. He didn't claim to be a god-king descended from Ra. Instead, he was the new boss of Egypt, a ruler of Greek origin who had conquered Egypt, an outright tyrant in many ways. But still he wanted legitimacy. And how could he get that without tradition? The old Egyptian religion was polytheistic. People worshipped many gods. But in the next room over in Greece, the people worshipped one god. So it wasn't that hard to convert. Ptolemy called himself a pharaoh like the Egyptians. He built giant temples to gods like Amen and Isis, and he said he was the new Alexander the Great. These were all clever moves to paint himself as a traditional leader. But his greatest propaganda coup was the library. In the mid-4th century BCE, Ptolemy opened the Library of Alexandria to show the world he was the legitimate heir to Alexander's grand ambitions. At the very least, that's what the legend says. History, though, is rarely neat. We don't know for sure how the library started, if it was just Ptolemy showing off or part of a bigger plan. The library was connected to a larger institution, the Mouseion. It was a kind of ancient university. Scholars from across the world were invited to live there, work there, study. Their poets would recite their latest epic. Scientists would measure the stars, historians record their findings, and mathematicians would prove geometric theorems. Names like Euclid, the father of geometry, and Eratosthenes, who calculated the Earth's circumference, are said to have worked there. But here, as the first mystery, we don't actually know what the library looked like. No ruins survive, no blueprint, and later writers are vague. They described rows of scrolls, lecture halls, gardens, maybe a temple. But did it look like a Greek temple, an Egyptian temple, or something else entirely? Historians debate this even today. Was it one massive building, or a network of smaller archives? Again, we simply don't know. The real treasure was the scrolls. Ancient sources claim anywhere from 40,000 to 700,000 texts. Imagine Babylonian records of eclipses, Egyptian medical papyri, Indian texts on surgery and philosophy, Greek dramas, early works of history. But here's the problem of historiography. No catalogue survived. Everything we say about the contents is speculation, pieced together from fragments and references in later works. Did the library hold lost plays of Sophocles? Lost epics rivaling Homer? Advanced science centuries before its time? We'll never know. For hundreds of years, the library flourished. Alexandria was safe inside its natural harbor, far from the wars and conflicts of the rest of the Mediterranean. But then in 48 BCE, Julius Caesar arrived. He was trapped in Alexandria during a civil war, and that's when things got bad. To keep his fleet safe, Caesar ordered ships to be moored across the harbor, but enemy forces crept in anyway. So he gave the order to light the ships on fire. The plan was to scuttle the fleet and deny it to his enemies. But the wind shifted. Flames swept inland. Ancient writers like Plutarch later claimed the entire library burned down. But here's the catch. Not all sources agree. Did Caesar burn the library? Or is this legend exaggerated later to make the story more tragic? Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Some sources are adamant that the library was saved. A Roman writer named Atticus says Caesar rescued the library from destruction. But others tell a darker tale. The historian Suetonius wrote, that Caesar couldn't save the library because it was locked up tight. The keyholder had fled, worried that the city would be sacked. Either way, some parts of the city, including parts of the library, definitely burned. The historian Plutarch claimed 200,000 volumes were destroyed. That's on the high end, but it's possible. What's not possible is that it happened on Caesar's orders. The guy most responsible for burning the library was probably the same guy who accidentally lit the fire. The problem is separating fact from fiction. Most historians now agree that Caesar at least caused significant damage to the library. But how much is anyone's guess? Maybe it was just warehouses near the docks, or maybe thousands of scrolls. Either way, the library survived. References in the next few decades suggest it stayed open for centuries. Under Roman rule, Alexandria remained a center of learning, but wave after wave of political turmoil chipped away at it. In the 3rd century CE, Emperor Aurelian invaded Egypt. He campaigned against the unruly priests and later rededicated the city. Maybe he burned part of the library in the process. In the 4th century, Theophilus, a Christian patriarch, destroyed pagan temples. Some sources claim the library, or what remained of it, was caught in the purge. Some surviving texts contain margin notes saying that they were removed from Alexandria to save them from Theophilus. Still later, Arab historians pointed to the Muslim conquest in the 7th century as the final blow. But most modern scholars believe that story was written centuries after the fact. It's more legend than fact. So was there a single great fire, or a slow decay across centuries? That's the great historiographical puzzle. Here's where it gets fascinating. The idea of the lost library grew larger than history itself. By late antiquity, writers used it as a symbol of tragedy. The idea that humanity once had all wisdom gathered in one place, only to lose it forever. This is why the Library of Alexandria is remembered not just as a building, but as a myth of lost history. So what happened to the scrolls? Well, some did survive. Greek philosophy, Egyptian medicine, Babylonian astronomy, these were all preserved in the works of later writers. They borrowed from those earlier texts, copied fragments, quoted lines. But no single work survives from the library itself, nothing from Euclid, Archimedes, or Apollonius. What happened to those texts? Perhaps they were lost to the same forces that eroded the library itself. War, neglect, changing rulers. Or perhaps they were lost to the sea. One theory claims that shipworms burrowed through the papyrus and scrolls stored in the harbor. Legend has it that an earthquake struck, the walls collapsed, and the books flooded. Shipworms feasted on Alexandria's knowledge. Unfortunately, there's no evidence for that story. But the loss feels right. If the library was so close to the water, it makes sense that flooding could have destroyed it. The problem is we don't have any documents that say it happened. Modern scholars think the library may never have been as vast as the legends suggest. But the idea of the library, this dream of universal knowledge, still haunts us. So when we talk about the Library of Alexandria, what are we really talking about? Not just scrolls and buildings. We're talking about the ambition of an ancient city to collect all knowledge, the fragility of cultural memory, how fire, war, and time erase what people once valued, and the way history itself is written, rewritten, and mythologized. In a way, the library was never completely lost. Fragments survived, Greek philosophy, Egyptian medicine, Babylonian astronomy, because they were copied and carried elsewhere. But the legend of what might have been, lost plays, lost science, lost wisdom, remains one of the most powerful stories in human history, and that perhaps is the true legacy of the Library of Alexandria. A reminder that knowledge is precious, fragile, and always worth preserving. You can watch the next episode right here. Thank you so much for watching and learning with us.